former chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Attahiru Jega, joins us now to have a conversation about Nigeria's democracy, as well as, all that is going on in terms of political parties and all of that. Thank you so much for being here. You've been a scarce man to get a hold of, but we appreciate you coming tonight on the program. Well, a good place where I would like to kick off this conversation is the fact that as a former chairman of INEC, the current situation that we're seeing in the country, where we're seeing a lack of internal democracies, with especially the major political parties, where we're seeing the courts really determining a lot of outcomes. How can we resolve some of these issues, especially looking at Anambra, the elections, which is just right in front of us?
Well, thank you very much for having me on your program. I'm very glad to be here. You see, there are, at least to my mind, three critical issues that make for a credible election and an election that has integrity. One key area is the mindset of the politicians. Of course, the capacity of the Independent National Electoral Commission to prepare for elections effectively and efficiently is the second factor. And the third factor has to do with the legal framework. Now, in the Nigerian context, whatever INEC does, if our politicians have a mindset of winning elections by hook or by crook, and they are willing to deploy resources to influence both the legal process and the operational mechanisms of conducting elections, then obviously very serious challenges will continue to bedevil the integrity of the electoral process. And to be honest, that's what, to my mind, we are seeing in Nigeria presently.
The Electoral Act Amendment Bill as it stands right now, all of these issues that you have raised, do you think, as it is, do you think it can really address these challenges and help us find a lasting solution?
I think, I feel very strongly that the draft bill being considered by the National Assembly could and should have been better than what we see presently. Definitely, since 2010, we have not seen remarkable improvement in the legal framework for elections in our country. So any effort to improve that legal framework is commendable, is acceptable. But one would have expected that the distinguished members of the National Assembly address their minds very, very clearly on some of the key issues that really can enhance the integrity of the electoral process. And looking at the bill that they are now considering, I see at least three key areas where there are serious challenges, which, if they are not addressed and they pass the bill the way it is, would create more problems than it will solve.
All right, we'll get back to those three key areas. Maybe you would have to mention them. You talked about the mindset of the politicians. Are we to take it that you're saying that INEC is eternally handicapped? Because that sounds like what you're saying, that INEC can't get around it, that their mindset is the way it is, then we must have challenges concerning our elections, that they can't get around it.
No, there are things INEC can do, there are things INEC cannot do. And INEC cannot influence the mindset of our politicians. INEC can try to develop a competence and capacity to organize elections efficiently and effectively and transparently, but if the politicians who compete in the electoral process have a mindset of winning elections by hook or by crook, what General or President Obasanjo at that time called the do-or-die affair, then obviously INEC is handicapped in terms of dealing with that kind of mindset.
And their laws to be able to deal with this kind of mindset.
They truncate the laws, they operate with impunity, they deploy resources, the security. INEC is not a security organization, but we have security organizations that appear incapable of addressing some of these challenges which bedevil the electoral process. So I think we would be putting so much, the responsibility of INEC by law is to prepare to conduct elections with integrity. you know, but there are so many things that it has no control over. And clearly, INEC has no control over the mindset of our politicians.
But it has a control over what political parties it registered. And of course, being that it has that power means that it can also have some sort of powers in terms of helping out with internal democracies of this political power. So INEC as it is right now, what is the role of the agency really to help these parties really grow our democracy from inside out?
That's why I said you need a robust legal framework that can really give INEC the capacity, you know, to influence and ensure that certain things are done appropriately. For example, presently the existing legal framework mandates INEC to monitor party primaries. Now, INEC would monitor party primaries, would have reports of party primaries about how the primaries have unfolded. There have been two contradictory provisions in the Electoral Act which really need to be addressed. On the one hand, a section says that once a party conducts its primaries and submits to the candidates to INEC, it cannot change it for any reason whatsoever. On the other hand, another section of the Electoral Act says that parties are to conduct their affairs through the democratic process. Now, INEC will go and monitor the conduct of elections. It will see, if you talk about a democratic process, for example, if elections are held, you know, somebody will have the majority votes, will emerge number one, somebody will be number two, somebody will be number three. But at the end of it, the political parties hiding under that provision that says once they submit a list to INEC, it cannot be, INEC cannot change it for any reason whatsoever, will submit somebody who was number 4, you know, in the primary elections, or even somebody who did not participate in the process. And INEC cannot change it for any reason whatsoever. That's what the law says. You know, so INEC is supposed to be an institution or an agency that operates within the legal framework. And if the legal framework is not robust enough to empower INEC to do what ought to be done to improve the integrity of the electoral process, then obviously you are going to have serious challenges.
Is handicapped? Because the reason why I ask this question, if you look at the Electoral Act as it even stands right now, as amended in the country as it is, the fact that there are some provisions that INEC has to conduct elections, it has that administrative powers. That is its primary objective, really. Even the transmission of results, some will say that the card readers as it stands right now has the powers to do that.
You see, frankly, if you look at the law very carefully, you will see that, and that's the whole idea about electoral amendment process, is to improve the legal framework. You know, the legal framework, the 2010 Electoral Act as amended is certainly better than the 2006 Electoral Act which preceded it. But there are still areas that needed to be improved upon. And I've told you one area which since 2011, after we did, when I was there and we did the election after 2011, we discovered how political parties were exploiting the legal framework, you know, to really undermine the democratic process. And the INEC could do nothing about it because the law really hamstrung its capacity to do it. So those are the things that you expect would be improved. INEC had been calling since 2011 for improvements to the electoral process. Before the 2019 elections, at the last minute, something was done, but it was never signed into law until after the elections. You know, and now we are expecting before 2023 that we can have a much remarkably more improved electoral legal framework. And I'm telling you, from what we have seen, from the draft bills under consideration by the Senate and the House, there are going to be serious, remarkable constraints. You know, so rather than really creating a better...
Let me ask you this. Those All right. Looks like we're going to go on a break.
No, we're still
okay, we still have time. All right. Those in power have betrayed the trust of Nigerians who elected them. That's your statement. Who were you particularly referring to?
Well, we are talking about improving the electoral legal framework. And the responsibility is for the executive, but it's mostly the National Assembly. And there is need for them to work together to improve the electoral legal framework, because in particular, the executive has expressed the commitment to ensuring that we deepen our democracy and we improve the electoral legal framework. So really, it's a joint responsibility. I am saying that there is much to be desired in the way in which they are approaching this amendment process.
Okay.
There are things that they need to do that they have not paid attention to, and there are things they are trying to do which will create more problems than they will solve if they proceed the way they are going.
And of course, in that same statement, you did make reference to the two ruling parties. You say that Nigerians shouldn't vote both of them. We'll talk about that when we come back from that break. We'll find out if he was actually campaigning for the political parties that he belongs to right now. When we return, Professor Attahiru Jega rejoins us in the studio.
All right, glad to have you back. We'll still have the former chairman of INEC, Attahiru Jega, here in the studio with us. Now, again, I heard you say do not vote APC and PDP, the two major political parties in the nation. One would have thought you'd have stopped there. But then you went ahead to say instead vote PRP. Are you telling us something that we should know, that you're probably contesting for the president?
Well, you have abridged what I have said, but essentially what I have said is that our politics need to be better than it is presently. And we have two dominant parties in Nigeria, and we have seen how they have managed our politics and our economy. And it is clear that a lot much needs to be desired in the way in which they have run this country. And as a political scientist, my own take is that there are good people in each of those parties, but the parties are dominated by people who one can say without fear of contradiction that they probably put too much of their selfish personal interest rather than the national interest ahead in what they do. And so basically what I'm saying is that let's have an alternative platform that will bring good people that really are selfless and are focused in terms of addressing the challenges that bedevil this country. And to me, that's probably the best way to begin to address the challenges that we face as a country.
And that platform is PRP.
It can be any party, okay. But I have joined PRP, and I think it's a good platform to drive that process. But you know, membership of a political party it's a free choice, you know. But I'm saying that the way we are trying to reposition PRP, it will be a good platform for people to come and for us to put hands together to address the challenges of this country.
Right, and of course you do fit in that category. I'm sure you saw the interview of the former president talking about Ibrahim Babangida, where he says the next president of Nigeria should be in his 60s. And you fit in there, so to follow up on that.
That is his personal opinion, which, but as far as I'm concerned, a president of Nigeria should be the best choice of the people of Nigeria. Age may not matter.
Okay. How are you juggling being a politician now? Because you've gone back to the classrooms, I learned. So how are you juggling being both a politician and an academic?
The Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria allows every citizen regardless of his professional inclination, to also be actively involved in politics, whether as a voter or a member of a party or even an active participant in the political process. And I have chosen to exercise that right. It does not affect my responsibility as a teacher. I train students, including at the master's and PhD levels, you know, and I would like to say that modestly I do my best in that regard. But don't forget, I'm also a political scientist. So I have read about Nigerian politics, I understand the challenges, and I have also had the privilege for 5 years of relating relatively more closely with Nigerian politicians. So I have a clear appreciation of the serious challenges that Nigeria faces, and particularly the dangerous trajectory which many of our politicians are leading this country to. And if we all sit and watch, you know, do the sit-down look and allow them, in no time they will really
it's a good thing. It's a good thing you've gone in this direction, because that takes me to my next questions, really, because you are a political scientist, and we have to, you know, tap into your wealth of knowledge. This ongoing debate about rotational presidency, would like to get your thoughts on that, and also the southern primaries that we have seen. Moving forward, really, how can we do better to deepening Nigeria's democracy?
We can do better to deepen Nigeria's democracy, first of all, by ensuring that we respect the Constitution, we comply with the rule of law, and we also ensure that whoever is in power has the national interest as his focus rather than personal idiosyncratic tendencies. You know, and if we can do that, a lot of the challenges that we face now and the perceptions of inequity and the lack of opportunity would be remarkably addressed. You know, and we can also improve the process remarkably by having good people rather than sitting and watching reckless people wrecking our country, to come in and help alter that trajectory that is going to lead us to self-destruction as a nation if care is not taken. So really that is the option. Every Nigerian has a responsibility, and everybody knows that things are not right in this country. So we need to ensure that good people come in, and there are good people everywhere. And it is very, very important that we encourage people to come in.
But then you talked about...
Give me a minute, please. Because you still haven't answered that question. Because at the end of the day, rotational presidency is an issue. Yes, we're looking at good people. But as it is right now, it is a big issue looking forward to 2023. So should power still remain in the north, or should it go to the south?
As far as I'm concerned, the way Nigeria is now, we need the best person to be the president with competence, with capacity, with experience, in order to get this country out of the challenges that we have presently. That person can come from the north or from the south or from the east or from the west. But the important thing is, even if political parties agree and concede, because it's not a constitutional issue, it's a party zoning arrangement, even if a political party decides that a candidate should come from a particular area, what we need to do is not to just say anybody who comes from that area. Nigerians must interrogate the capacity of that person to lead this country appropriately. Because this idea of rotational presidency, anybody from the north, anybody from the south, cannot take us out of the challenges that we have in this country presently.
All right. The INEC, as we have it today, they have used technology so far, you know. In almost everything they're doing now, they're using technology. But then, do they have a need to wait for a new law on this transmission of results? After all, they are called independent.
You see, the legal framework, until they began to address it in the existing amendment process that is going on, expressly prohibited electronic voting. Okay? Now, until then, INEC had been experimenting and piloting electronic transmission of result, because every country tries to use technology to improve the integrity of the electoral process. I can tell you, since 2012 or 2013, after the 2011 election, the INEC that I chaired began to pilot electronic transmission of result, because we thought that is another way of moving forward in the use of technology to improve the integrity of the electoral process. Now, since 2015, the present INEC under Professor Yakubu has paid a lot of attention to improving the technology, particularly in transmission of results. Now, the complicating factor is this. While people are saying, let's move in the direction of electronic voting, you know, and the National Assembly now, in this amendment process, said that INEC can now use electronic voting. But they put a proviso. They put a proviso to say, provided that they will not do electronic transmission of result. And that is really, it's on the one hand, it's like they are not allowing INEC to do electronic voting, because I cannot see a situation in which you can do electronic voting without electronic transmission of result. I don't know any country that does that. Electronic voting almost invariably goes along with electronic transmission of result. But apart from that, most countries will start like what we are doing, verification and authentication of voters, you know, with a smart voters card, and then the card reader that we deployed. The next stage will be electronic transmission of result. In Nigeria, a lot of the fraudulent activities that take place in elections is after the declaration of result at the polling unit, and as you manually move results to the collation centers. Electronic transmission of result will address that. And many of the politicians who are insecure do not want it. And unfortunately, that is what we are seeing. So really, that issue of electronic transmission of result, I hope they will be able to examine it. I have given them the benefit of doubt and said maybe they were in such a rush to pass the Amendment Act. That's why they didn't look at the arguments and the reasons why we needed electronic transmission of results. It's a good thing it hasn't been passed yet,
so there's still room, because
Absolutely.
I do know that the harmonization is ongoing. So of course, we would hope and see that happen, really. But Professor Attahiru Jega would have to say thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks.